Some of the quarterbacks featured in this video were traded because they couldn't handle the pressure. Some of them didn't audibilize, but it was clear that there was a fire-breathing dragon about to blitz. Quarterbacks only have so much time to pull the trigger and throw an accurate pass. Other quarterbacks were traded because, even though they had plenty of time to pass, they couldn't hit the mark. Some quarterbacks hung out their receivers to dry with their poor passing. Kilmer of the Saints completed his 4th season with them in 1970, and it wasn't a good one. He was traded to the Redskins for a 1971 4th-round draft pick, center Wimpy Winther, and a 1971 8th-rounder, defensive back James Elders. What a difference a year makes. With new head coach George Allen taking over, Washington went from 6 wins and 8 losses to 9 wins, 4 losses, and 1 tie. Kilmer finished 5th in the NFL MVP voting. He played 8 years in Washington while the 2 Saints draftees never started any NFL games. This was an outstanding trade for the Redskins. My definition of the word major, for purposes of this video, pertain to a high degree of quarterback name recognition, high round draft choices involved in a trade, and or the oddity factor involved. Check out my video entitled, "These Huge 1970s Quarterback Trades Will Shock You," for even bigger trades. It's got over 20,000 views in the last 2 months. Let's get after it. Art Starr, Packers' legendary quarterback, retired after the 1971 season. The Packers were desperate to replace him with whom they felt was an up-and-comer, the Dolphins' Jim Gaizo. They traded their 1974 and 1975 second-round picks for him, which resulted in quality players for the Dolphins. Gaizo quickly found out that the Packers' glory days had ended 6 years earlier and that he was ill-equipped to lead the Packers. He lasted only 1 year in Green Bay. The Dolphins fleeced the Packers in this trade. This next trade involves a quarterback and a cornerback for a quarterback and a cornerback. Charlie Johnson and Bob Atkins for Pete Beathard and Miller Farr. This has to be an NFL first and last trade of its kind. Charlie Johnson was in the United States Reserve for the majority of the 1967 and 1968 seasons. He only started 2 games, but in 1963 and 1964, he had back-to-back 3,000-yard passing seasons, which was a rarity back then. But he was age 32 in 1970, and the Cardinals wanted a younger quarterback to battle Jim Hart for playing time. So they made this trade. Pete Beathard was a first-round draft pick from USC by the Chiefs, and he was traded by them to the Oilers for huge defensive tackle Ernie the Cat Ladd in 1967. Beathard wasn't much in St. Louis, as he only threw 8 touchdown passes with 13 interceptions in 2 years there. He does hold the distinction of playing in the AFL, NFL, and WFL. He played for the Portland Storm and Chicago Winds of the WFL. Steve Spurrier of Florida was the 1966 Heisman Trophy winner. He played 9 years for the 49ers, started 26 games, and threw 40 touchdowns with 60 interceptions. In April 1976, he was involved in the first trade in Buccaneers history. In an effort to drum up local excitement in their inaugural season, they traded 2 players and a second-round draft pick for him. Spurrier started their first 12 games, they lost them all, as he had 7 touchdown passes, 12 interceptions, and 1,628 passing yards. That was it for him. He was one and done in Tampa. Pete Liske started 1 game for the Jets in 1964, then was released and signed by the Toronto Argonauts in 1965, who then traded him to the Calgary Stampeders in 1966. His 1967 MVP season wasn't a fluke, as he tossed 31 touchdowns and 4,333 yards in 1968. He was signed by the Broncos as a free agent at the end of 1968, where he was an average performing quarterback in 1969 and 1970 when he threw for 16 touchdowns and 22 interceptions. In 1971, the Eagles traded a 1972 fifth-round draft pick, wide receiver Jim Craig from Washington, for Liske, who put up similar numbers for the Eagles in 2 years there, 14 touchdowns and 22 interceptions. The Steelers made a great trade when they peddled underperforming Dick Shiner to the Giants for running back Frenchy Fuqua, who would play 7 years for Pitt and amass almost 4,200 scrimmage yards, and linebacker Henry Davis, who would start 33 games in 4 years. Shiner went 9 of 12 passing in his only year with the Giants. Snead completed his 7th season with the Eagles after the 1970 season and his 10th overall. After 13 starts, 15 touchdown passes, and 20 interceptions in 1970, the Eagles sent him packing to Minnesota for 3 draft picks, the best of which was Henry Allison, along with tackle Steve Smith. The Vikings really needed a quality quarterback since Fran Tarkenton and Joe Kapp were no longer around, but they didn't receive Snead's overall fine passing prowess. In only 2 starts and 7 games played, he threw only 1 touchdown with 6 interceptions. At the end of the year, he was sent packing for Tarkenton. Art Starr was nearing the end of the line in 1970. He'd hang on to play one more bruising year, due in part to Don Horn not catching on, despite being a first-round draft pick in 1967 out of San Diego State. In 4 years, he threw 16 touchdowns and 22 interceptions, despite Starr missing 13 games due to injury during that time. Horn did spend 1968 in Uncle Sam's Army, so I guess I shouldn't be too rough on him. In 1970, Horn's 13.2 interception percentage was the worst in the NFL, and Green Bay had seen enough. They traded him to Denver for defensive end Alden Roche, and the team switched first-round draft picks. The Broncos got tackle Marv Montgomery, and the Pack got Rookie of the Year running back John Brockington, who'd rush for over 5,000 yards for Green Bay. The Pack came out on top in this trade. Steve Fuller went to Clemson and was the Chiefs' 1979 first-round draft pick. They landed the pick by trading their 2 second-round picks in 1979 and 1980. Defensive end Mike Stensrud from Iowa State was the best selection as he played 11 years. Despite being a fine running quarterback, he led the NFL with 49 sacks in 1980. Maybe he was thrown into the fire too soon, because he started 12 games as a rookie. His 4-year Chiefs totals are 22 touchdowns and 32 interceptions in 52 games played. Sam Wyche had great size for a quarterback in the late 60s to early 70s. 6'4", 218 pounds. He started 9 games for Cincy from 1968 through 1970 and tossed 12 touchdowns against 9 interceptions. In 1971, he was traded to Washington for running back Henry Dyer. Even though the only statistic that he had from the 1971 and 1972 seasons was 1 rush for 4 yards, he gained valuable experience learning from old pros Sonny Jurgensen and Billy Kilmer. He parlayed this experience into becoming an NFL head coach at the young age of 39 when he coached the Bengals. He was the 1988 NFL Coach of the Year when his Bengals won the AFL title. He coached Cincinnati for 8 years and Tampa Bay for 4 years and compiled an overall 84-win, 107-loss record. His career is outstanding when considering that he played for the Wheeling Ironmen of the semi-professional Continental Football League prior to signing with the expansion Bengals as a free agent.